Hi, and welcome to Swan Island Dahlias. I'm Heather, and I just want to give you a tip of the day. We always get the question of what is a seed pod versus a bud, and we do get a lot of questions or a lot of comments, and people say my dahlias aren't blooming. And I want to show you the difference between a bud and a seed pod. And so I'm going to have you come up close and kind of take a look. A bud is getting ready to open, so it is a bloom that has not opened. A seed pod is a bloom that has already bloomed and is closing up and has already lost its petals, or the petals are closing up and forming a seed inside that dead bloom. So as we take a look, the easiest way, and most people mistake it most commonly on the collarette or novelty style dahlias, sometimes on the singles. So most commonly we make the mistake on this style of dahlia because they are hard to identify. So easiest thing to see and to tell is a bud will be round in form. You can kind of see, like on this where it's very round, this is a bud. So the petals are still forming in here. It has not bloomed. This will be opening and is still developing, and the petals will be opening in time. And as it grows and gets larger, you can see that this is still forming and will be opening in time. And as we move across here the bud has gotten larger and is starting to open, and a new flower is forming and is going to be opening. And here is one opening, and it does have a honeybee. There it just went. So this is a very young bloom. And the way that we can tell that this is a young bloom is looking at this pollen center. It is all waxy. And this is a nice young bloom. This is at a perfect age to cut. So as a cut flower on this one, this would be perfect age to bring it into your house. So it's nice and young. This pollen has not become fuzzy yet. Once this pollen becomes fuzzy, that tells you the bloom is getting older. So the more fuzz and more fuzziness, that's the best way to describe it, the older the bloom is. So as we go down, this guy is really not a great cut flower, and some collarettes and singles are just generally not good cut flowers, and that just is their characteristic. It's nothing you can change. As you can see in this, see how it is starting to get fuzzy around the edges? It's already naturally lost a petal, and that's just the genetics of the variety. But the more we see the fuzziness around the edge, that's the way to see the age on the bloom. So the more fuzz, the older the bloom. Now some collarettes and singles like this just start to show the fuzziness even when the bloom is still cupped forward. But that starts to tell you how old the bloom is, because you can't tell by looking at just the size of the bloom because they are such flat petaled. But that is the way to tell. So you really want the more of the wax in the center and less of the fuzziness when you're cutting this style of flower. Now we do denote in our catalog whether we recommend certain varieties of this style as cut flowers or not. Now we don't want you cutting them at this stage. Now this is a very young bloom. It needs a little longer on the plant before you cut it. So this is still too young to be cutting. Now you'll see that there are a lot of bees on this plant. So it's very important to be cutting them early in the morning, just because the bees do love these. And if you have any allergies to bees, these are probably not the varieties to be having in your yard. Now if you love bees, these are the varieties to have. Now we need the bees because bees cross-pollinate, which are so important to creating new varieties. Back to creating new varieties. So they are cross-pollinating across all dahlias, and they like these varieties especially because they can get to the pollen center the easiest, which is why you see them on these. So we look at bud versus seed pod. Now we talked, a bud is nice and round. A seed pod is pointed. And if you look at this guy here, this is an old bloom. It is pointed and not round. So there is a difference here. Seed pod is pointed. That is an old dried up bloom. This is a nice young bloom that has not opened yet. We get pictures all the time of plants covered in seed pods, and they say that my buds will not open. What am I doing wrong? And unfortunately, we have to reply and tell you, you must have gone on vacation when that plant bloomed, because these are all dried up blooms and these are all seed pods. These have already bloomed and you just happen to miss it. So if I actually go ahead and cut this guy off, and when you go ahead and deadhead, we don't want you picking just this head off. We want you to go down to the next leaf set at least. But if I were to open this up, you will see that it has all the dried up pollen inside. And as it continues to dry up, it's going to create seeds in there, which will actually be all different little guys that are where the bees have cross-pollinated. So this is an old bloom and is not a bud. So you missed the flower. If you've got a plant covered in seed pods, that is not ever going to open up to a new flower because it's already old and done blooming. So here we can look at another one. This is one that has not completely closed up, but that is a seed pod that will be closing up completely as the days go on. So it's really important that you remove those seed pods. These are all going to be seed pods, and we want to make sure we remove those, especially on plants like this that are such heavy bloomers. If you look, this plant has a lot of blooms on here. We've got 30 or 40 blooms on these few plants, and if you do not deadhead this, it's going to stop blooming. So it's really important that when these guys are done blooming, that you go in and go down to the next leaf set and remove these old seed pods to promote the growth and that it continues to put out new laterals at each of the leaf sets. So I've gone ahead and taken off these guys, and I'm going to go ahead and continue to do that all over this plant to make sure. Now I'm going to make sure that I've gone down. Now if you don't like the height of your plant, don't be afraid to go down to the next leaf set to make sure that you're taking the plant down a little bit. This is perfect height right now. And so this one, I don't need to go down extra longer stems. But if your plant seems like it's 5 or 6 feet and you think it's too tall, we cut all of our cut flowers at 20-24 inches. So I would just go down 1 or 2 leaf sets and trim that out, which you can definitely do at your home. But definitely make sure you are deadheading and not just picking the heads off of your plant. It'll actually do much more benefit to the plant and produce more flowers. So hopefully I've given you a little bonus tip in your yard, and now you know the difference between a bud and a seed pod, and you've learned a little extra tip for the day. Thank you so much for watching. Have a beautiful day and take care.